10 corrupt police officers reacting to life sentence. 10 corrupt police officers were stunned and outraged when they were sentenced to life in prison for their crimes. Despite their vehement protests, the judge remained firm in his decision, emphasizing the severity of the officers' actions and the importance of justice. The courtroom was filled with gasps of shock and disbelief as the officers had expected a much lighter sentence. As they were escorted out of the courtroom, they all glared at the judge, vowing to make him regret his decision. Little did they know, their lives were about to take an even more unexpected turn. Do you want to know more about them? Well, don't worry. In just a few minutes, we'll be disclosing the identities of the 10 dishonest police officers who sold their characters for a small sum of money. Let's start. Officer Hill, unfairly targeted and singled out. Officer Hill was a crooked cop who unfairly singled out and harassed innocent people in his community. He would pull people over for little infractions just to search their cars and residences for proof of criminal activity, yet he seldom ever turned up anything. He was only interested in making money, regardless of whether or not the victims were innocent. His behavior was unethical and unfair, further straining relationships between the police and the community. The populace was understandably enraged, and for good reason. The one bright spot was that Hill was apprehended and sentenced to time in prison. That corruption in law enforcement can and will be punished was demonstrated by his acts.
In the state of Florida versus Zachary Tyler Wister, we the jury find as follows as to the counts charged and the information. Count 1, guilty of racketeering as charged.
Officer Green, judged without a chance to explain his actions. Officer Green had a strong reputation within the police force prior to the revelation that he had participated in unlawful activity. When it was revealed that he had been stealing from the company, both his bosses and his employees were taken aback by the news. After that, he was apprehended and found guilty of stealing. The unethical deeds that Officer Green committed have left an indelible mark on his reputation, despite the fact that he was formerly highly admired for his service. Now that he has been found guilty without being given the chance to present his defense, he has to figure out how to make peace with the reality that he was proven guilty. When it comes to matters of justice, things aren't always what they appear to be, and this serves as a depressing reminder of that fact. It's a lot to take on. Even though Officer Green is not currently working as a member of the police force, his legacy will always be remembered. He should serve as a warning figure for persons who might be tempted to behave unethically, but should resist the impulse to do so, because he's a symbol of caution. Every single one of us is responsible for keeping an eye out and doing our part to ensure that the judicial system continues to be the one that is fair and just. Officer Adams, unfairly punished for mistakes. Among his colleagues and the people he protected, Officer Adams was held in the highest regard. He made a critical error that ultimately doomed his professional life. He was blamed for corrupt behavior, including receiving a bribe. He was found guilty and given a prison sentence despite his protest of innocence. The unfairness of the consequences of his actions was one of the most trying situations Officer Adams had to deal with. He was hurt and ashamed by their betrayal. He knew he was innocent, but he tried to keep a cheerful attitude in the face of the damage to his reputation, and he would do anything to clear his identity. Officer Baker, less than human by the justice system. Officer Baker is a crooked cop who abuses his position of trust to take advantage of the public and the law. It's not uncommon for him to take bribes and use his position of power to bully and threaten locals. Those who have had to deal with Officer Baker's dishonest behavior report feeling violated and helpless as a result. Some people have come away from it feeling dehumanized by the judicial system. Officer Baker, along with other corrupt law enforcement officials, must be brought to justice. Innocent citizens bear the repercussions of an unjust society if the law is not strictly enforced. Corrupt law enforcement officials, such as Officer Baker, must be held accountable for their crimes and removed from positions of authority, and we must all work together to make that happen. Officer Cooper, a criminal without a chance to prove his innocence. Before he was suspected of wrongdoing, Officer Cooper had a sterling reputation. He was falsely accused and never given a chance to clear his name, despite his unflinching loyalty to his employer. Because of the accusation, his reputation and job were destroyed, and he felt helpless and hopeless. He had no idea who was pointing the finger at him or why. As a result of the charge, Cooper's world had been flipped upside down, and he no longer felt secure. Despite there being no solid evidence, he had to endure the stigma of being a corrupt police officer. The injustice that he experienced as a result of being falsely accused without a fair trial is illustrated through his story. Officer Nelson, a scapegoat for the system's failures. Before his collapse, Officer Nelson enjoyed widespread regard as a member of the police force. His honesty and professionalism earned him a lot of respect. He too fell victim to the same corruption that had affected so many of his peers. His honor was sullied by his involvement in a bribery affair. He felt deceived and disregarded since he was made the scapegoat for the system's shortcomings. His reputation and career ended because of the severe sentence he received. It's tragic that Officer Nelson's honest effort and commitment were ultimately in vain, but he fell victim to the corruption of the system. Officer Ramirez, an example to be made of. Ramirez, an officer on the force, has a reputation for corruption when allegations surface that he accepted bribes from criminals and ignored their misdeeds. He's been busted more than once for the same thing, but still holds a position of power. The general public views him as a representation of tainted power and unfairness. Because of his acts, many people no longer trust the police and believe they are being used as an example. Regardless, Officer Ramirez keeps behaving in a way that disgracefully discredits his position as a law enforcement officer. Officer Carter, a statistic. Officer Carter was a crooked law enforcement official who abused the trust of the community by taking advantage of their vulnerability. He had no regard for the law and was willing to breach it in order to accomplish what he wanted.
Will, come in that house. Get out here now. Do it now.
No.
Do it now.
No.
You think I'm going to argue with you? I'm going to tase your
He had no regard for the law. He saw humans as nothing more than numbers, rather than as unique persons who merited respect and justice. It was well known that he would resort to underhanded methods to achieve what he wanted, such as bribes and threats. People feared him and believed that they were helpless to stop him from doing what he wanted. Justice was finally accomplished. He didn't show any remorse and acted as if he was invincible, but happily he was taken off the force and will never be able to victimize anyone else. Officer Mitchell, a symbol of corruption. Police Officer Mitchell had been charged with bribery and abuse of authority. His career as a law enforcement official is over and his reputation is ruined. Mitchell now has to spend the rest of his life bearing the stigma of being a byword for graft. This serves as a sobering reminder that our actions have repercussions and that no one can ever truly escape accountability. It's a cautionary tale about how easy it is for those in positions of authority to give in to corrupt temptations. Officer Mitchell does not deserve to be held up as a scapegoat for the entire department. Officer Edwards, a symbol of oppression. Officer Edwards is a tainted law enforcement officer who has been abusing his position of authority to exert undue influence, apply undue pressure, and take advantage of weaker individuals. Many people are left with the notion that their rights have been infringed as a result of his dubious practices. A significant number of individuals he is responsible for serving feel threatened and distrustful as a result of his total disdain for the law. It's well known that he uses his position to bully, control, and threaten the people he comes into contact with. Because of his dishonest actions, I feel as though I'm treated more like a symbol of tyranny than a person. It's time for him to be held accountable for his acts because his activities have caused damage that cannot be undone in many communities, and it's time to be held accountable. Check out their reactions after getting sentenced for life. If you want to watch more like this, then please do check out these videos as well, and subscribe to our channel for regular updates, and we'll see you in the next one.